Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video. Today I'm taking over the best £800 or $900 gaming PC build for the months of April and May 2016. Now this build is actually a 3-part series in which today's video I'm going to be taking you over the parts. I highly recommend you don't skip to part 2 because the rundown of the parts is really important, and then part 3 will be the benchmark, with part 2 being the tutorial of how to build it. So these are the parts I went for, these are why I chose them, and these are why these are the best parts in that price range. This build will smash 1080p and 1440p. 1080p is probably the preferred resolution if you're going to be trying to achieve those higher frame rates, so 120, 144 frames per second, those kind of regions. But if you'll settle with 45 to 60, then 1440p is definitely a very, very viable option if you're willing to tone some settings down a little bit. So let's start off with the CPU. The CPU I've gone for is the AMD FX 8370. It's AMD's highest end 8000 series chip, without going up to the 9000 series, which are really like unnecessary for gaming. It comes out of the box clocked at an incredible 4 GHz, which is really, really nice, which is on par with some of Intel's highest end LGA 1151 chips, and is a superb overclocker. AMD kill it with overclocking, and this FX chip is definitely one of their flagship overclockers. Now, of course, if you've got a chip that's great at overclocking, what do you need? You need a great motherboard and you need a great CPU cooler. The CPU cooler I went for isn't the highest end, nor is it the lowest end. It is the most popular CPU cooler, the bread and butter of CPU coolers. It's the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. Now, Cooler Master, their Hyper 212 Evo comes in at a very, very good value price. I believe it's £25, $27, that kind of mark, and comes with one fan on one of the sides. I've also added another fan on the left hand side, and you'll see that in part 2 of this build, but one fan really is all you need. Now, for RAM with this build, you have to be very careful because the choice of the motherboard, the RAM DIMM slots are quite close to the CPU socket here, and the RAM are very close here. And once the CPU cooler's over the top, you can't have high RAM because it will just get blocked off. So what I've gone for is I've gone for a low profile kit, which is made for this exact purpose. Is the Corsair Vengeance low profile 8GB kit. It comes in plain black, but you can get it in black, blue, white or red, and it has a cache latency of 10, which isn't the lowest nor is it the highest. It's absolutely fine. I went for one 8GB DIMM because it provides the best value, and dual channel really isn't something you're going to need with this build. It's not an APU build, dual channel really isn't effective, and it comes in at a really nice price. Clocked at DDR3 1600MHz, which is all you need. DDR4 poses no significant advantage for gaming, and AMD chips not as of yet. Anyway, don't support DDR4 anyway. For the motherboard, I went for a very beefy motherboard. Now, if you're going to have an overclocking chip that's great at overclocking, you have to have a good overclocking motherboard. So the motherboard I chose was the Asus 990 FX Revision 2.0. Now, this is a Sabertooth board, and some of Asus's older Sabertooth boards, including this one, have a very, let's say, unique aesthetic to them. And now some people aren't going to like this sort of greeny browny camo ammo colour scheme, but as you can see with the build behind me, you can't actually see those bright colours anyway. And for me, the only colour that sticks out is the white notches on the RAM DIMM slots because of the tinted window on the case, which I'll get to in a moment. The reason going for such a good motherboard is so important, and going for the 990 FX chipset, is down to overclocking. When you overclock, you're sending more power, and in short, you're sending more voltage to the CPU. You're making it work harder than it was originally intended, although AMD do intend you to overclock. Therefore, going for a beefy motherboard is important because the VRMs and the chipsets and the MOSFETs around the CPU area get very, very hot. Therefore, going for a very good motherboard is great because you get big heat sinks on those caps and on those MOSFETs and chipsets and what have you, which basically helps them keep super cool and helps you get some more overclocking headroom. Some of the great features about this motherboard is, down to my user error the other day, I was tinkering as you do, and I broke something. In fact, I broke the way it booted with the RAM. So there's absolutely no problem. This motherboard's got all the fancy features. You've got a clear CMOS button on the back in case you brick your overclock and brick your BIOS. You've got LED indicators for your DRAM, for your GPU, and for your CPU to indicate if there's a problem. You've got USB headers galore, fan headers galore, PWM fan headers galore. It's got everything you could need, everything but the kitchen sink, as they say, and the 990 FX chipset from Asus definitely helps you with that. Now, of course, storage is a biggie. For me, my storage setup was quite unique, but I might recommend something different. The hard drive I went for was the Western Digital Caviar Blue. I recommend going for a hard drive for mass storage in any build, but hard drive boot times, as we all know, are slow. Very slow. Now SSDs, you have a couple of options. For me, I used a super fast SSD to help with the streaming and the editing performance of this machine, and I used the Kingston HyperX Savage 480GB SSD. But in the parts list, I've shoved an 850 Evo 256GB SSD, which gives similar read and write performance, meaning you've got fast boot times. You'll put your Windows on here, but it doesn't add any of the unnecessary stuff that I need for editing. But that's a nice SSD, and a 1TB hard drive is great for your games, because you really need your games to load 110% faster on an SSD. Not really. Now for the big boy, the graphics card. The graphics card I went for was the R9 380X, specifically the 4GB model. You get some lower end 380X cards with only a 2GB frame buffer. Now that might not seem too much of a big deal to a lot of you, but during my testing in GTA 5 on high and ultra settings, I was exceeding 3GB of VRAM, meaning on a 2GB card you would have a severe bottleneck going on there, and 2GB really restricts you only to 1080p. You can really forget about 1440p with only a 2GB frame buffer. I've also gone for this power color card due to the insane cooling solution as well. Now a lot of these cards have really crappy cooling solutions, and AMD cards, everyone knows they get a little bit hotter, especially this generation, than some of the Nvidia offerings. Therefore, this power color card with its great cooling solution is a great choice for this build. For the case, I went for the Phanteks Enthoo Pro. Now, my God, this is the best case I have ever seen. Now, I'll be putting a review up of this case in about a week's time. But this case is superb. Everything from the user experience, the manual, you've got a full glossy manual in colour, and it just makes it such a difference. You get a toolkit with all your screws, it labels all your screws, tell them where you're for. Just makes everything so much easier, because you can have your toolkit here, you can go, right, okay, I want that screw, and get that exact screw out with no problem. Honestly, this case is phenomenal. It's a tad on the big side, it's an ATX full tower, so you may want to go smaller. However, for upgradability, it's a great option. You have 6 3.5-inch bays, which will also double up as 2.5-inch bays. You have 2 dedicated SSD mounting points. It is a superb case. You get a massive window on the side, a tinted window, which I found in my testing to be quite scratch resistant, and all that kind of stuff. You get front panel USB 3 and USB 2, HD audio, power, reset, absolutely everything you could want, and cable management on this thing is impossible to get wrong. Your cables will be so tidy. It comes pre-cable managed with all the cables already there. It's super easy to add your own cables in for your power supply, and it's just a great choice. Talking of power supplies, I went for the XFX 750W 80 Plus bronze model. It's a great power supply from XFX. It's on the budget side, but it also provides plenty of wattage for this AMD build and for some upgrades in the future. Features their special technology, which allows loads of different components and hardware without you going over your wattage limit. And that is this build. If you'd like to see part 2, it's going to pop up now on your screen, a little bit of a preview as well. If you haven't seen, if this video is just come out and it's not April the 1st yet, then you won't be able to click on it. You can click on the cards section as well, or the link in the description below. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to drop a like rating and to subscribe. Sorry this video has been on the longer side, but I hope it's been super duper informative, and hopefully I will see you in part 2 and in the next GeekaWhat video.